Anybody online?
Good
Hello?
morning, sir.
Good morning, good morning. Shall we start? Shall we start the class?
Okay, sir.
Today we are going to start a new chapter on the diseases of the male urethra. Why we have separated the male and female urethra means the development, the structures that surround the urethra, and the diseases that affect the urethra are different in males and females. So the female urethra, the urethra in woman represents only the posterior urethra of the male counterpart. So it has been separated. And the diseases are also tackled separately. Male urethra is a tubular structure extending from the bladder neck to the external urinary meatus. So proximally it begins at the bladder neck, distally it ends at the external urinary meatus, the opening on the summit of the glans space. So I already said you, female urethra represents only posterior part of the male counterpart. It has got different surrounding structures, different diseases, so it will be discussed separately. The male urethra has got anatomically 4 parts. The prostatic urethra and the membranous urethra both constitute the posterior urethra. They are deep to the perineal membrane. They are within the pelvis. They are inner parts. Whereas the exposed parts are the bulbar urethra and the penile urethra, which constitute the anterior urethra. So sometimes we will be calling it as anterior and posterior urethras, or anatomically we call them as prostatic, membranous, bulbar and penile parts of the urethra. The prostatic urethra extends from the bladder neck to the verumentinum, and verumentinum is a very important anatomical landmark. Important anatomical landmark when you go through the urethra with a scope, or when we attempt surgery on the urethra through a endoscope, or when we reach the prostate through the urethra, this anatomical landmark has to be made out very, very clearly. So it's nothing but a small hillock of tissue indented at crown by a pit called epiculus masculinus. This is some simple elevation of the tissue, a heap of tissue, the floor of the urethra, onto which number of glands open, onto which the prostatic glands, onto which the seminal vesicles, onto which the vas deferens, all openings are there on the verumentinum. Another thing is, verumentinum represents the distalmost part of verumentinum represents the limit, distal limit of the prostatic urethra. Just beyond that, there is membranous urethra. Surrounding the membranous urethra, there is the external sphincter, very, very important structure. If the external sphincter is lost, the man becomes incontinent for urine for lifelong. Complete incontinence, permanent incontinence will be there. So this very small muscle, which is located in the wall of the membranous urethra, is very, very important. It's a skeletal muscle. It gives the voluntary control of the urine. If you want to stop the urine, you have to close, contract and close the membranous urethra by contracting the external sphincter. So this is a very important landmark. You should not damage it. Then membranous urethra, already told you, which is present in between the two perineal membranes, deep and superficial perineal membranes. This part of the urethra will be narrowed, always kept in closed position by the external sphincter. So you can see here the deep perineal membrane, superficial perineal membrane, the narrowed part of the urethra, though it is normal, it is always constricted, membranous urethra surrounded by external sphincter. Beyond this external sphincter, you have got the all superficial perineal musculature. Proximally, you have got the prostatic urethra and the verumentinum. Distally, you have got the bulbar urethra. Bulbar urethra extends from membranous urethra to the venous portal junction. It is a curved part of the urethra, a little bulbous, the bulbous-like thing, and it is external to the superficial perineal membrane. This is the bulbous part of the urethra. At the superficial perineal membrane, it closes down here, smooth cone. So this part of the bulbous urethra appears as a smooth cone on erythrograms. You should not get confused with for a stricture. The lines will be very smooth. The last part, the perineal urethra, is normally flat and anteroposteriorly. The distance of it is filled with urine. And in the distalmost part, it will be bulbous or fossa-like. This is called a navicular fossa. So the urethra is dilated two parts. One is distalmost part, navicular fossa, another one is the bulbar part of the urethra. The most important anatomical structures surrounding the urethra are the sphincters. The external sphincter, which is a striated muscle within the urethral wall, which provides the voluntary continent mechanism. And another one is the sphincter, internal sphincter, which is nothing but the thickened muscle around the bladder neck. This is called as internal sphincter or genital sphincter. It contributes a little to the continent mechanism, but it acts more commonly as a genital sphincter. When the sperm gets ejaculated into the prostatic part of urethra, so it can go either way. It can go into the bladder, which is least resistant pathway, or it can go along the distal part of the urethra. So to facilitate the passage of sperm through the urethra, the internal sphincter closes and it acts as a genital sphincter, so that the ejaculate will come out through the distal part of the urethra. So although it contributes to the continence, it mainly acts as a genital sphincter, whereas the external sphincter is the sole responsible structure for continent mechanism of the urine. So this must always be protected, whatever procedure you do. You can see the normal urethra on erythrogram, retrograde erythrogram. Here the dye is injected through the urethra. You see the wall of the pineal urethra is very smooth, curved smoothly. This is the bulbar part, again curved smoothly, at the ending just like a smooth cone. This is called as normal cone of the bulbar urethra. Here the almost constricted part is the membranous part, you cannot see it. Beyond that you can see the prostatic part of the urethra. So you can see two curvatures in the urethra. One is the inferior pelvic curvature at the bulb of the urethra. This is one, and this is extra or peripelvic curvature, extra curvature outside the urethra. So whenever you pass a catheter or a Buzi, etc., you can straighten this peripelvic curvature and you can pass through the bulbar curvature. So these curvatures are important when you try to pass an instrument through the urethra, either the catheter or the urethrospore. So you can see the cone clearly. And the last one is glands opening into the number of glands open into the urethra. You can see number of prostatic glands opening onto the perimonium. Then ejaculatory duct opening onto the perimonium. The vas deferens is also open. And here the bulbourethral glands of Cowper's gland or bulbourethral glands, though they are embedded in the perineal muscles, their ducts will open into the bulbar part of the urethra. That's why they are called as bulbourethral glands. Beyond that, number of tiny glands open all along the urethra. They are called as glands of Litter. Glands of Litter. All these things secrete mucoid material for easy passage of the urine through the urethra without causing any friction. Same thing. Urethra is lined by Different types of epithelia depending on the part of the urethra. Proximally close to the bladder, transitional epithelium is present at the bladder end of the urethra. It gradually changes to pseudostratified epithelium, pseudostratified columnar epithelium, which is present in prostatic, membranous, and most of the penile urethra. So it is lined in majority, it is lined by pseudostratified columnar epithelium. The distal part, where it is close to the externopathy, it is lined by non-keratinizing stratified squamous epithelium. Non-keratinizing stratified squamous epithelium. So the type of epithelium will change. Majority of this urinary tract is lined by transitional epithelium, which is capable of distension. The usefulness of the transitional epithelium is capability for distension. In the bladder distance, pelvis distance, ureter distance, the epithelium will not be damaged. It distends, it stretches without causing any breach in the epithelial layer. That is the usefulness of the transitional or stratified epithelium. So the proximal prostatic or membranous part, it is lined with transitional epithelium. In the middle, it is covered by pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Distalmost part is lined by squamous. Again, the female urethra is multi-layered tube lined by transitional epithelium proximally from the bladder and non-keratinizing stratified squamous epithelium distal. So with this review of the anatomy, we will discuss about congenital anomalies. So the common congenital anomalies affecting the male urethra are the posterior urethral valves, hypospadias, non-development of some part of the epispadias, maldevelopment of the urethra. Then congenital strictures and meatal stenosis. Though they are rare, congenital strictures and meatal stenosis, still sometimes we can see them in children as a congenital origin. The important thing is posterior urethral valves. So the importance lies, though it is rare, seen 1 in 5 to 8,000 live male births, though it is rare, the importance lies in the, it should be recognized early. Otherwise, during infancy, the child will succumb to the disease. Usually we see the obstructive uropathy in old people beyond 50 and 60 years, where there will be stricture and benign prostate hypertrophy causing urinary obstruction. So the same clinical picture, obstructive uropathy, is similarly seen in children of 1 or 2 years age, or even in infancy. So that is the importance of this posterior urethral valves. If we can treat them early, we will be saving the child from the obstructive uropathy and renal failure. What are these valves? Why they are called as posterior urethral valves? They are present in the posterior part of the urethra, just beyond the lumen. At the junction of the prostatic and membranous part of the urethra, posteriorly you have got them. So they are called as posterior. And they are valves. What are these valves? They are nothing but they are folds of the mucous membrane. The valves are just membranes, just distal to the vermantinum, obstructing the urethra of boys. You do not see these posterior urethral valves in women. They are not seen in girls. They are seen only in boys. The architecture of these valves is they resemble flap valves. You can see the flap valve. This flap will allow only unidirectional flow. The fluid can pass through this way, not in the reverse direction. They are the flap valves. Majority of the valves in our human body are flap valves. The cardiac valves are also flap valves. They are just membranes. They allow unidirectional flow of blood in the heart. It's like that here also, they act as flap valves, but in a reverse direction. Cardiac valves, though they are valves, they allow the blood in a direction which is useful to the body. But here, these particular valves, they act in a reverse way. They cause obstruction to the urinary flow. They prevent the obstruction to the urinary flow from the prostatic urethra into the membranous urethra. But in a reverse direction, if you inject fluid, or if you inject gelacaine, or if you pass the catheter into the urethra, it will easily go. They do not obstruct the retrograde passage of the fluid or the instrument, but they will obstruct the antegrade urinary flow. That is the importance of this valves. So this is a very clear diagram depicting the effects of these membranous valves. Here you can see the valves, membranous folds of mucous membrane causing obstruction to the urinary flow. So this is normal membranous and bulbar urethra, which is normal. The prostatic urethra or posterior urethra is very much dilated. The back effects has dilated the back pressure has dilated the bladder also. And there is vesico-ureteric reflux. Vesico means bladder into the ureter. From the bladder into the ureter, the urine is refluxing in a reverse direction. The ureters are dilated. This goes on to the kidney. Kidney also will be dilated. If it is prolonged, the kidney substance, the cortex of the kidney gets compressed and becomes non-functional. So the simple membranous valves, they will cause all these features of the obstructive uropathy. They have dilated the prostatic urethra, dilated and hypertrophied bladder, vesico-ureteric reflux, ureters are dilated, hydroureter, the pelvis is dilated, and the cortex, the functioning part of the kidney, is compressed and has become non-functional. So these are all the very dreadful effects of these membranous urethra. If you do not think of it, if you do not identify them in the early infancy. Whenever an infant comes with urinary tract infection, a child of few months below 1 year age comes to you with urinary tract infection, don't neglect. Think of all possible congenital anomalies like meatal stenosis, like phimosis, like posterurethral valves, like vesico-ureteric reflux, like patent urachus. All these congenital anomalies which will present with urinary tract infection in infants must be, then only you can find them. I think you will search for them. Antegrade urinary not this clearly shows you the presence of the posterior urethra. You can clearly see the posterior urethra is. How do this condition present clinically? Nowadays, you have got very good facilities for ultrasound examination, antenatal ultrasound examination. Twice they will do during the whole period of 9 months. Third month they will do and see whether the embryo is developing normally or not. And 9th month they will again repeat the ultrasound. Twice we will do the ultrasound examination of antenatal to monitor the development of the child or the infant. In this examination, they will look for all the congenital anomalies, possible congenital anomalies. You can also visualize the urinary system, renal system. You can see dilatation of the ureter, you can see dilatation of the kidney also. So this is a very useful investigation. Antenatally, we can diagnose bilateral hydronephrosis with distended bladder. So this is important. Distended bladder indicates the obstruction is beyond the bladder. So in such cases, you can suspect the posterior urethral valves in a male child. When the infant is born, when the baby is born in the neonatal period, if they develop recurrent urinary infection, there is no cause to develop urinary infection in a child. So if a child develops urinary infection, there must be some congenital anomaly. So in such cases, if the child presents with recurrent urinary infection, uremia and renal failure, you must think of the posterior urethral valves or other congenital anomalies. So most of them can be diagnosed in the neonatal period with good investigations. Sometimes these valves are incomplete. That means they do not cause complete obstruction, partial obstruction. So the child will be passing urine normally, but there is pressure effect also. So in such cases, as the time goes on, there will be gradual destruction of the kidney substance, and in the adolescence or early adulthood, the person presents with renal failure. He presents with renal failure. So in such cases, when you do the ureteroscopy or ureterogram, cystogram, you can find the indication of urethral valves. So antenatally you can diagnose if you are careful. Neonatal period, if you are suspicious, you can diagnose. In neglected case or missed cases, you can diagnose them during adolescence or adulthood. Diagnosis, the importance of the diagnosis is it should be detected and treated as early as possible to minimize the degree of renal failure. And the second drawback is it is difficult to see them on ureteroscopy. So routinely, directly after examining the urea, etc., if you go for ureteroscopy, you do not see them. Difficult to see unless you have thought of the disease and see carefully in the posterior urethra, you will easily miss these posterior urethral valves. So whenever you suspect posterior urethral valves, you must see carefully the posterior urethra of the ureteroscopy, or it is better to go for voiding cystogram, not simple cystogram. Cystogram is nothing but you inject the dye into the bladder, remove the catheter, take the X-ray. So in such conditions, you do not see them. Unless the urine and the dye enters into the posterior urethra, you cannot see the obstruction. So you have to take the voiding cystogram, inject the dye into the bladder, make the bladder full, and ask the patient to try to pass urine. When he attempts to pass urine, you take the X-ray. So in such condition, because he is attempting to pass urine, urine enters to proximal urethra, urethra gets dilated because of obstruction of the perimantine water membranous urethra. So voiding cystogram is the important investigation which will show you the presence of obstruction at the typical level. It shows dilated urethra above the valves, bladder is hypertrophied and often shows diverticular, and you can demonstrate vesico-ureteric reflux into the dilated upper tracts. So dye will be seen in the dilated ureters also. So this is very important investigation. This is a voiding cystogram. You can see dilated bladder, you can see very much dilated prostatic urethra, and normal urethra is here. So the problem lies at the junction of prostatic and the membranous urethra. This is autopsy in the membranous valves.
Sushmita, turn off your mic. Sushmita, turn off your mic.
Please silent. You are disturbing others. Coming to the treatment, the problem is recognition of the urethral valves. Once you recognize them, the treatment is very easy. You catheterize the child for some time and allow free drainage of the urine so that it will relieve the back pressure and it will allow the kidneys to recover their function. Then you can go for definitive treatment of endoscopic destruction of the valves. You can see here, you can just cut these membranous valves with cautery. They will relieve the obstruction. They will damage the valves. They will make them incompetent and relieve the obstruction of the urinary tract. Followed by lifelong support. So if you have diagnosed the condition lately, already the kidney is damaged. So the person needs lifelong support for the kidney. He will be developing recurrent urinary infections and uremias, not support. That's why it should be diagnosed as early as possible, and treated as early as possible to avoid these late effects of the obstructive uropathy. So here you can see with these hooks, the membranes are being cut. So this is the treatment. This is the Vermonten. The raised mucous membrane is the Vermonten. Summary, they are congenital membranes. Antenatal ultrasound typically shows the urinary tract dilatation. If not recognized antenatally, they may cause recurrent urinary infection in children. This should be diagnosed. Treatment is valve destruction accompanied by treatment of urinary infection and renal impairment. This is the first and most important congenital anomaly of the affected male urethra. Second one is hypospadias. Hypospadias is non-development of distal part of the urethra. Urethra is a tube extends from the bladder neck to the external meatus. So if the distal part, some part of the urethra is not developed properly, the external urinary meatus, the terminal part of the urethra, instead of lying at the glans penis, summit of the glans penis, lies somewhere proximally on the undersurface of the penile shaft. It is a short urethra. Only half of the urethra has been developed. It is a short one. The external opening will be underneath the penis. This is called as hypospadias. Hypo means underneath. This is seen in 1 in 2 to 300 male live births. This is the most common congenital abnormality of the urethra. Most common congenital abnormality. The three characteristic features of hypospadias are opening underneath the penis or perineum. So ventrally placed external urinary meatus. It will be underneath the penile shaft or on the scrotum or on the perineum also. In more severe cases, when 3/4 of the urethra has not developed, the opening will be on the perineum. Then the question of the sex of the child comes into question. Whether the concerned child is a male or female, we have to again investigate this. The second feature is hooded prepuce. Along with this urethra, the ventral part of the prepuce, the frenulum, are not developed. So the prepuce appears hood-like, hooded prepuce. And the part of the absent urethra will be represented by a fibrous tissue or fibrous cord, which will bend the penile shaft, so leading into what is called as chordae. So ventrally placed external meatus, hooded prepuce, and chordae are the three characteristic features of hypospadias. So here you can see the external opening is on the underside of the penis. Actually, it should be here. It's a blind pit. The site of this external meatus is represented by a blind pit, but the opening is beyond this corona. Just at the junction of the shaft and the corona, you can see the So this is a coronal type of hypospadias. You can see the frenulum is absent here. The prepuce appears hood-like, hooded prepuce. This is the second part of the hypospadias. Then there is ventral deformity of the erect penis because of the fibrous tissue here. It curves down in erection. It is cardi. Cardi is due to absent structures distal to ectopic opening, represented by a fibrous card which deforms the penis in a downward direction, which is called as cardi. Types of hypospadias. So it can be just proximal to the external opening on the glans itself. It is called as granular or glandular type. Just proximal to the normal side of the opening. If it is at the coronal area, it is called as coronal type. Next, penile type, on the shaft of the penis or penoscrotal junction. Then in the perineum. According to the position of the meatus, hypospadias is classified into glandular, coronal, penile and penoscrotal and perineal types. In the glandular variety, meatus is placed on the glans penis only, just proximal to the normal side. Coronal hypospadias at the junction of the underside of the glans and the body of the penis. On the coronal sulcus, it will be present. Penile and penoscrotal hypospadias, the meatus is on the undersurface of the penile. Perineal hypos, this is important. Perineal hypospadias. This is the rarest, most severe abnormality. The scrotum is bifid. You cannot see this single scrotal sac. It will be divided in the midline. The urethra opens between its two halves. And if it is associated with testicular mole descent also, there comes the difficulty to determine the sex of the child. The bifid scrotum resembles the labia. The urethra will be in between and no testis is palpable in the side of the scrotum. So everything resembles the female part and the question of sex of the child will come into problem. So you have to differentiate the sex of the child by other investigations, by demonstrating the core body, by studying the chromosomal analysis, or sophisticated investigation has to be done to determine the sex of the child. The treatment, why should we treat hypospadias? Yes. Why should we treat hypospadias? Anyway, patient is passing urine, somehow urine is coming out, then what is the problem? Hypospadia does not cause obstruction or urinary tract infection because the patient can pass urine normally, there is no obstruction of the urinary pathway. Still, the indications are to improve the sexual function and to correct problems with the urinary stream. If the opening is underneath on the scrotum, it is difficult for the person to pass urine. You cannot pass urine in standing position just like all other males. There will be soiling of the clothes, soiling of the inner thighs, etc. And also for cosmetic reasons. Cosmetic reasons, you have to correct this deformity. So the aims of the surgery are to provide the person with a straight penis, straight penile shaft, and to make him pass urine from the tip of the penis in standing position. You see that the child passes urine in standing position from the tip of the penis. These are the aims of the surgery. The principles of the surgery are correction of the cardi and resiting urethral opening. So if you see the hypospadias, the opening will be proximally placed from the external opening to the tip of the glans where the external opening normally should be. This intervening part is having a fibrous card which is bending the shaft of the penis. So first what we should do is correct the chordae, exercise this fibrous cord, make the penis straight. Once you exercise the fibrous cord, the external opening still recedes back. So allow it to recede back as far as it goes. Then from that point, you try to reconstruct the urethra and site the urethral opening in its normal place. So resiting of the urethral opening is second stage procedure. First stage, you correct the chordae, make the shaft straight. Then you reconstruct urethra and site urethral opening at the tip of the penis. For these things, there are two methods of this correction of these hypospadias. The first and the older technique is of Dennis Brown for distal, which is suitable for distal hypospadias, is tubularized incised plate erythroplasty. The second one, which is used for more proximal hypospadias, is techniques that utilize the foreskin. So the extra foreskin, loose foreskin is there. You can utilize this foreskin to reconstruct the missing part of the urethra. Or you can bury the peripheral strip of the skin on either side of this chordae fibrous tissue and try to make it into a tube. So that is the older method of tubularized incised erythroplasty. So to understand this, you must see this picture. So these are the corpora cavernosa. The penis has been kept onto the abdomen. These are the dorsal artery nerves, veins, etc. And here, this is the open part of the urethra. The missing part of the urethra is open and is small plate. The length of small plate is seen from the distal opening, from the external opening to the glans penis, which is called as urethral plate. Previously, this has not been recognized. Nowadays, this has been recognized and its usefulness has been recognized and it is used for reconstructing the missing urethra. So in the olden days, what they do is, on either side of this urethral plate, a little part of the penile skin is left and the skin is incised here, and it is covered and sutured. The remaining part of the skin is mobilized and sutured over and putting a catheter. So we are burying, wantedly we are burying a strip of skin on either side and put a catheter for 21 days. So this buried part of the skin, when an epithelium gets buried in the tissues of the body, what do we have? We can develop a implantation dermoid. So what is implantation dermoid? A cyst developed from the buried epithelium. Sequestration dermoid, the burying happens congenitally, not accidentally, but congenitally the epithelium gets buried, it will develop into a cyst. And accidentally, also if the skin goes inside, it forms a cyst. Cyst is nothing but a rounded tube or rounded structure. So here, if you bury a strip of epithelium skin here and put a catheter, this epithelium grows all around the catheter and forms a neo-urethra or new tube. In 3 weeks, it forms a new tube. So you have reconstructed, you have developed a new urethra where the urethra is missing, in that part where the urethra is missing. So this is the principle of the Dennis Brown operation. So this is called as tubularized incised plate erythroplasty. Second one, where the opening is more proximal, penile, penosporal, etc., you can utilize the foreskin for reconstructing the urethra. So these are the principles of the operation. That's why in hypospadias is a contraindication for circumcision. You should not excise extra foreskin before reconstructing the urethra. So circumcision is a contraindication in case of hypospadias. Circumcision should be avoided before hypospadias has been repaired, as some techniques utilize the foreskin. Operations are typically undertaken before the age of 1 year. If you do the operation as early as possible, see the fitness of the child. If the child is fit for surgery and anesthesia, you perform the procedure. It is best performed by a specialist pediatric urologist. A urologist specialized in pediatric operations, or a pediatric surgeon specialized in hypospadia surgery can do the operation to get the good results. This is the classical Dennis Brown operation. This is the external meatus displaced proximally. This is the urethral plate, and on either side of the urethral plate, a little strip, 2 to 3 mm strip of skin is left and incised. The flap is raised. Here you put a catheter and overlap this mobilized skin and close it. So here you can see a long strip of skin is being buried. So this long strip of skin will complete the circle and forms the neourethra. Neourethra is after certain time. If there is any tension on the skin closure, you can do relaxation incisions on the scrotal wall. Meanwhile, the bladder is drained by perineal urethrostomy. Another opening is made in urethra in the perineum. The catheter is kept. From this catheter, urine is being drained till that time the urethra develops in this form. This is classical Dennis Brown operation. In this procedure, they have separated the 2 layers of the prepuce. Prepuce has got 2 layers of skin, external skin and inner mucous membrane. External skin and inner mucous membrane. They are separated, and this skin flap is rotated. This skin flap is rotated to cover the absent part of the urethra, and it will form the new urethra. Okay. The recent one is making use of the urethral plate. Urethral plate is nothing but urethral mucosa extending from the hypospadiac meatus to the glans. This is the meatus, from this area to the glans, this part of the urethra, and is the ideal tissue with which we fashion the neourethra. So this is mobilized and made, this flat ribbon-like thing is made into a tube, which forms the new urethra. So this is the urethral plate. It is mobilized here and made into a tube. Urethral. This is the recent development in the treatment of hypospadias, making use of the urethral plate. Summary: hypospadias is characterized by combination of a ventrally placed urethral meatus, hooded foreskin, and chordae. Avoid circumcision, as the practice may be used in procedures to correct abnormality. Circumcision is contraindicated in case of hypospadias. And surgical treatment should be undertaken by a pediatric urologist for better results. Another very rare thing is epispadias. Here the opening will be on the dorsal aspect of the penis. It is very rare. The urethral opening is on the dorsum of the penis and is associated with an upward curvature of the penis. So in chordae, the curvature will be downwards, whereas in epispadias, it is the curvature of the penis will be upwards. It often coexists with bladder extrophy and other severe developmental defects. What is bladder extrophy? So bladder is a sac. It has got a posterior wall, anterior wall, a dome of the bladder. So congenitally here, the anterior wall of the bladder, the anterior abdominal muscles, anterior skin of the anterior abdominal wall, all these things are not developed. The pubic bones are separate, no pubic symphysis, they are separate. So there is a mass absence of the pubic symphysis, skin over the lower abdomen, the muscles of the lower abdomen and the anterior abdominal wall are absent. The bladder is represented by a membrane, a flat thing representing the posterior wall of the bladder with the two small openings trickling the urine. Two small openings, ureteric openings from which the urine will be trickling out. This is the appearance. So no anterior wall, no bladder neck, no urethra. So the urethral opening will be represented by an opening on the dorsal part of the penis. So this can be there. If it is simple, only the opening will be in the anterior dorsal aspect of the penis. If it is associated with extrophy, everything will be absent here. So this is the epismedias. The opening will be urethra is anterior, dorsal. Opening is in the dorsal of the penis. You can see the opening here. Instead of at this point ventrally, it is present dorsally. So if there is bladder extrophy, it needs different staged procedures to reconstruct the anterior wall of the bladder, to reconstruct the urethra, and to reconstruct the abdominal wall. A lot of multiple staged plastic procedures are needed to reconstruct the lower abdominal wall and the bladder. Another congenital anomaly is urethral diverticulum. Most often we see the urethral diverticulum in an acquired form, proximal or proximal to the urethral obstruction by stricture or by a presence of a stone like that. You see the urethral diverticulum. But also you can see it congenitally. Congenital urethral diverticulum is described and it represents a partial duplication of the urethra. Partial duplication. Two urethral tubes will develop. One will develop completely, another will develop at only one point, communicating with the main one, resulting in a diverticulum. In acquired form, this develops with increased intraurethral pressure beyond a stricture, proximal to the stricture, or presence of a foreign body or calculus in the urethra. If the urethra gets struck in the urethra, if the stone gets struck in the urethra, it weakens the wall of the urethra and develops into a diverticulum. The history will be, clinical history will be post-micturition dribbling. Patient passes urine and urine will be remaining in the dilated part of the urethra, which will trickle drop by drop for a long time after the completion of the micturition act. You can clearly diagnose it by cystoscopy or by a retrograde urethrogram. Retrograde urethrogram or cystoscopy can diagnose the presence of urethral diverticulum. Treatment is often unnecessary because it is a self-emptying diverticulum. The opening of the diverticulum will be distal to the diverticulum. So automatically the urine gets emptied, self-emptying type of diverticulum. So no, it is not causing much problem. No treatment is necessary. Or if it is symptomatic and causing trouble, so you can do a simple endoscopic procedure of incising the flap of urethral mucosa between the two lumens. So you cut the intervening mucosa and make the opening into a larger one. Or by open surgery, you can excise the diverticulum. So this is the urethrogram showing a diverticulum, which is communicated with the main urethra. So the aortic is here and the opening is here. So it is a self-empty. The urine automatically passes into this one. Endoscopy. This is the normal urethra, normal opening. This is the diverticular. If you want to treat endoscopically, you cut this mucosal fold. Cut this mucosal fold and make it into a single one. And congenital urethral stricture also has been described. It's a rare condition. It is also associated with duplication of urethra. Symptoms are delayed until adolescence. May be indistinguishable from a traumatic stricture. So adolescent boys comes with stricture of the urethra, and there is no history of trauma, no other predisposing cause like urethritis or instrumentation or trauma. Nothing is identifiable. In such cases, we may diagnose a congenital urethral stricture. And to dilate, a single treatment of optical erythrotomy or dilatation is usually effective. You can dilate the stricture, or you can incise the stricture spot by doing the urethroskopy. Do the urethroskopy, identify the stricture spot, incise the fibrous tissue with a diathermy carefully without opening the urethra. That is called as erythrotomy, which is done under vision by looking at it. That's why it is called as optical erythrotomy. You can go for optical erythrotomy, or you can dilate it repeatedly for 3 or 4 times. That is sufficient. That will stretch the stricture. So at this point, we will stop this class. The injuries of the urethra and strictures we will discuss later. Thank you. Any queries you can ask. Any questions you can ask. There are no questions. We will stop the class here. Thank you.